You ever get that feeling after you buy a budget gaming laptop, fire it up, and realize the frame drops the moment you load a modern title? I've been there, and the regret sticks around longer than the cheap plastic. That's why the first question I asked myself with the new ASUS TUF Gaming 16-inch model was simple. Does this machine actually feel like a smarter buy, or is it just another flashy spec sheet that fizzles out when you need it most? Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The hesitation most buyers feel with a mid-range gaming notebook is whether they're paying for a real experience or just a brand name. The TUF series tries to walk that line by offering a 14th Gen i7, an RTX 5050, and a 165Hz IPS panel, but the proof is in how those pieces behave when you sit down for a few hours of play, stream, or even just a video call. I spent a weekend treating this laptop like my primary machine, from a 2-hour Elden Ring marathon to a 30-minute Zoom meeting with a presentation, then a quick dive into Photoshop to edit some screenshots. What stood out wasn't just the raw horsepower, it was how the system managed heat, battery, and everyday quirks that rarely get a mention in marketing copy. If you're the type of gamer who wants to run AAA titles at 1080p with smooth frame rates, the RTX 5050 is a pleasant surprise. It's not a flagship GPU, but the 8GB of GDDR5 memory gives it enough bandwidth to keep newer titles above 60 frames per second on medium-high settings. In my tests, Shadow of the Tomb Raider hovered around 68 frames per second with all shadows on, and Fortnite topped 120 frames per second even with the performance mode enabled. That's the kind of performance that lets you enjoy competitive shooters without constantly toggling settings. The real win, though, is the 165Hz display paired with the WUXGA resolution. The extra vertical pixels give you a bit more screen real estate for multitasking, and the high refresh rate eliminates that jittery feel you get on cheaper 60Hz panels. But the RTX 5050 does have a ceiling. When I pushed the laptop to 4K resolution in Cyberpunk 2077, the frame rate dipped into the low 30s even with DLSS set to performance. If you're hoping to game at 4K on a portable machine, you'll need to dial down texture quality or accept a choppy experience. For most gamers who are happy with 1080p or the laptop's native 19201200, that isn't a deal-breaker, but it's a hidden trade-off that's easy to miss if you only glance at the spec sheet. Heat management is another practical concern. The i7-14650HX is a 16-core beast, and under sustained load the fans spin up aggressively. I noticed the laptop's surface stayed warm but not scorching after an hour of Apex Legends, thanks to the dual-fan setup that ASUS markets as self-cleaning. However, the fan noise became noticeable around 55 dB, which can be distracting in a quiet room. If you plan to game late at night in a shared space, you might want to keep a headset on or accept the acoustic trade-off. The good news is the machine doesn't throttle. The CPU maintained its boost clocks without dipping, which tells you the thermal design is competent for its class. Battery life is a point where expectations often clash with reality. The 90Wh battery gave me about 5 hours of mixed usage, a couple of games, some web browsing, and a video call. That's respectable for a gaming laptop, but it's not a replacement for a desktop workstation if you need to be unplugged for an entire day. The presence of a Thunderbolt 4 port lets you attach an external GPU dock, but that defeats the purpose of portability and adds extra cost, so it's more of a future-proofing feature than an immediate solution. Storage is where the TUF really shines for the everyday user. A 1TB PCIe 4.0 SSD boots Windows in under 10 seconds, and loading times for games were consistently under 2 seconds on titles like Valorant and Minecraft. The SSD's speed also helped with large file transfers. I moved a 20GB video project in just a few minutes. If you're a creator who needs fast storage for video editing or 3D rendering, this capacity and speed are a genuine value add, especially compared to budget laptops that still ship with SATA drives or smaller SSDs. RAM is another practical factor. 16GB of DDR5 is enough for current games and multitasking, but if you regularly run memory-heavy applications like virtual machines or large Photoshop files, you'll feel the pinch. The TUF's two SODIMM slots are upgradable, but you'll need to open the chassis, which isn't as straightforward as on some ultrabooks. For most gamers, 16 GB is sufficient, but it's worth noting that the upgrade path isn't completely plug-and-play. Who should buy this laptop? If you're a serious gamer on a budget who still wants a respectable experience on modern titles, someone who values a solid build, decent thermals, and a high refresh display, the ASUS TUF Gaming 16-inch fits the bill. It also makes